Hi guys, this is Dr. Lee from Lee Acupuncture, and I have a special guest, Dr. Carol Culture. Hi, Doc.
Hi, how are you?
Good to see you. I think I met you last year before pandemic.
Yes,
It's been a
yes.
while. You look great.
Yep. Oh, thank you.
Okay, so let
We're,
me.
we're all we're all aging in reverse, right? It's like minus 1 year because we lost a year of life.
You lost it exactly. Okay, so that's good news though. So let me introduce you to Dr. Carol Culture. She is a senior clinical embryologist, reproductive biologist, and the founder of ART Compass IVF app. She specialized in molecular biology, cell biology, and then biotechnology. Her key contributions to those fields include advances in stem cell culture, epigenetics, and reprogramming. And her PhD research focused on animal cloning and postdoc fellowship focused on human embryonic stem cell research. Wow, that is amazing. Animal cloning to now human embryo. Okay, a lot of advancement will change, but I want to ask the question. So can you tell us about your company or the lab you're working now?
Yeah, so I am a clinical embryologist at the CCRM Orange County lab. So during the day, regular human clinical infertility medicine. Um, and so I always say, like, my patients are the embryos. Right? The physician's patients are the people, and then my patients are the embryos. So I know all about eggs, sperm, and embryo development. And that brings in a lot of my cell culture background and the things that I worked on during my PhD and in my postdoc, which were all kind of how do you grow cells? How do you grow human cells? How do you keep them alive? How do you keep sterile environments and those kind of things? So that's what I do now, except I do it for people who are trying to get pregnant.
Exciting.
And also, you asked me about my company too. So that was my day job by night. I also created a small piece of software. It helps IVF labs with the management of the lab itself. So it's a lot about like quality systems and fulfilling the regulations. And but we also, as part of that, we also do a lot of patient image archiving, and we deliver like the images of the patient's embryos to them, along with the genetic testing results of the embryos and other IVF cycle information. So it's kind of like an all-in-one lab data lab IVF lab management tool piece of software.
That sounds fantastic. So you're not only helping our patients or babysitting these little eggs or embryo, you are really helping your colleague and then your field advancement.
Yes, yes,
That is good.
exactly.
So I want to hear about what made you focus on this infertility field or infertility.
Yeah, so I was 37 and I had been trying for a few years to have a baby. So I went through infertility myself. And then I finally became pregnant with my own miracle baby. And that made me realize two different things. One, there are so many women like me who waited a long time to start their careers. Yeah, I'm sorry, to start their family while they were getting their careers up and going, right?
Mhm.
And not only that, but people just need infertility treatments now more than ever for a bunch of different reasons, like environmental and waiting longer to start families. And then not only that, but there are just a lot of products that are aimed at young women in general to freeze their eggs early so that they don't end
Mhm.
up needing to have an egg donor or going through infertility troubles. So they'll freeze their eggs young, but then they need to be made into embryos somewhere along down the line. So it seems like everyone at some point needs some kind of a fertility service, whether that's a little bit of help from the doctor, some hormonal help, some IVF cycles or egg freezing, depending on what it is. I even know a lot of people who just want to, they've had, for whatever reason, 3 girls in their family, and now they want a boy. It's not like they're infertile, but they just get to choose now,
Mhm.
if specifically the gender of their children. So yeah. And so I also just kind of realized too that, like, I needed a career that I could really leave my miracle baby every day for. And what would
Oh,
it be that would get me that excited enough to leave my own miracle baby in the hands of somebody else all day? And so I got into human embryology.
that is a beautiful story. That's a gift. I mean, there's somebody like you in this knowledgeable and focus on this infertility. I think that is definitely benefiting all of us. And I saw
Yeah,
your beautiful baby too. She's a beautiful. She's a beautiful.
thank you.
Yeah. So this the actually I met Dr. Kircho at the lab, like when I helping patients with it during the transfer. But I didn't know she's so humble. I mean, you can tell she's so humble compared to what she's capable of. And then I figured I later heard she published this book, The Thin Pink Line, and oh, okay. So must be this something about IVF. That's why I ordered, pre-ordered, and then I got it. And then, man, oh my gosh, this book, I mean, it's eye-opener. I love so much. It's not only just a fancy, happy ending reproduction, but this is a history, heavy duty. But I think it still is promising and is lovely. Can you tell me about the book? What made you decide to publish or something behind story about your
Yeah,
book?
yeah, absolutely. So I know I wrote a pandemic book.
I see.
It's it's so funny actually, because I definitely don't have time to write a book, but these are topics that mean so much to me. Every single chapter is something that has been a lived experience for me as a woman, as a person who has a vagina, as a woman who's had a baby, as a woman who has gone through now, almost every stage of life except for menopause. But everything from, being young and first getting a period, and then going on to get pregnant and having a baby. And so the progression of the chapters in the book, it starts with like some of the history of gynecology, then it gets into the history of the birth control pill. So early on in my life, for 15 years, all I wanted was to avoid having children. And then, so birth control, it was like the biggest thing on my mind in those days. Little did I know I would end up having so much trouble when I went off of it. But so then, yeah, the chapters, it basically goes like the history of gynecology through birth control, we talk a lot about period poverty and the kind of pink tax on women.
Mm,
Because we need these essential products, which are literally taxed at a higher tax rate. And it goes through, through sexual relations and through marriage, the marriage contract, and it continues on through different, and we're looking at these things from the lens of the regulation,
mhm.
the legal regulation of these different topics. And so we talk a lot about consent, medical consent, consent with your providers, and um, the different laws that impact our lives that we don't even think about a lot of times. And so at first, everybody asked me, like, are you going to write about abortion? Are you going to write a lot about abortion? And of course, like, abortion, it's abortive care is so important for women, and it is actually so important in reproduction, in artificial reproduction, to have um, assisted reproductive technology. You have to provide abortive care, because so many of our patients' pregnancies end in ways that we all would have hoped they didn't end that way. It's
Mm.
it's an empty sac in the uterus. There is no fetus growing there. Or it's a very profoundly genetically abnormal fetus, and the tissue is non-viable and it needs to be removed. So many infertility patients have struggled with miscarriage, with genetic abnormalities and with pregnancies that can't progress. So there would be none of what I do without abortive care. And so, but as I started thinking about the topic of abortion regulation in general, I'm like, every time we talk about abortion, it just like sucks the air out of the room, right? Nobody else, it's very contentious. And then you never get to talk about any of these other ways that the regulation of reproduction affects our daily lives. We never get to talk about the taxes on tampons and if, gay conversion therapy, if that should be legal or not. And so at the very end of the book, I start to get into topics of assisted reproduction. So we talk about how long can you grow embryos legally in the lab? We talk about there's a 14-day rule. Where did that rule come from? And, we talk about 3-person embryos. Those are a kind of a technique that can help to cure maternally inherited mitochondrial disorders. But it kind of borders a bit on human cloning. And I do talk a little bit about human cloning in the book too, and whether that's legal or not, and where we stand on all of those different kinds of regulations. So it's kind of a grab bag of topics that goes all the way from the history of gynecology through to the most cutting edge assisted reproduction anywhere in the world right now.
I think it's really informative book though, and then this unique book. Actually, I never saw this type of a book. That's why I think you just did a great job. And I think knowing what we are facing in something not only fancy story, as I said, I think you just brought it up in a beautiful way, and I really appreciate it. So let's go back to my more happy ending story. But that I love this book anyway. So you mentioned like today we are actually interviewing now you on Saturday, and you said you were like 7 days in the lab.
Yes, we work 7 days a week. So IVF cycles never end. Our patients need retrievals on Saturday, Sunday, holidays. The embryos need to be fed for and cared for. We need to do different things like assist to hatch them on day 3 and check on them and freeze them on day 5, 6, and 7. And so all of those things can happen on a weekend, anytime, any day of the week.
Wow. So you are really like a first babysitter. That is wonderful. That is wonderful.
That's so funny. We do say that all the time. Like, I am a part of people's family. I'm a part of their care team, and they've never, met or interviewed me or hired me, but I am like their first babysitter for sure.
That's true. That's true. So through your experience seeing this is so many your embryos or like eggs like in your patient the years, so what have you seen the most like fascinating? I want to hear something fascinating story happens at the lab. Is there any story you want to share?
Yeah, well, a couple of different things can happen. What we see in general, we see all different kinds of cycles. So we see the sad cases where you're expecting 10 or 15 eggs, and for some reason you don't get any. Or we see the case where you're only expecting 5 eggs, but we get 10. And all of them are mature, and then all of them make it to blast. I've seen cases where 100% of the eggs make blastocysts, and 90% of those come back normal genetically, and the patients end up with many more embryos than they would have than otherwise we would have thought. So, well, some of the amazing things that I've seen are like really poor looking embryos get transferred and turn into beautiful pregnancies that are like, it's like a miracle. Like nobody would have predicted it based on the quality of the embryo we transferred. And sometimes I see, embryos split after we transfer them. And so somebody who has been struggling with infertility for a long time suddenly ends up with not 1, but 2 babies.
Right.
That's a miracle. People who have been struggling for a long time and they finally become pregnant. It's just, those are the kind of things that are just a real joy to see. On the other hand, we get to see a lot of things that are abnormal. So we get to see a lot of abnormally shaped sperm and a lot of abnormal eggs and a lot of, cycles where somebody has 15 eggs and none of them make a blastocyst. And that's the reason why they're struggling with infertility. So it's hard because you get an answer at the end, like, well, your eggs are not making it to blastocyst. At least there's an answer, but sometimes you don't have a good answer for, well, okay, now how do I still get to a family with what I have? And so it is both heartbreaking, but also like the biggest joy of my life. So,
That yeah, exactly. A lot of drama. I mean, a lot of sad
right,
and
both
then
highs and lows.
it
Yes.
is. It is. I actually feel that way all the time. So when
Yes.
I follow your, like, let's say Instagram, because somehow I'm following your company and then yourself, the unique about your company shares a lot of information about how you can improve, like let's say egg qualities or life.
Yes.
You just mentioned like, why this egg? It's just so. I mean, we don't know why. So do you think the looking at here like your body more like holistically will help some fertility?
So I definitely think it can, because what most people don't know about eggs, human eggs, is number one, you're born with all the eggs that you'll ever have for your whole life. You're born with those.
Mm-hmm.
That means they were inside your mother's body when your mother carried you, right? So your eggs that you expect to start making a healthy baby at the age of 37, 38, 39, they have been around for a long time, since you were a fetus in your mother's body. And the other thing that people don't know is that it takes a human egg about anywhere from 180 to 300 days to go from a primordial pre-antral follicle to a primary follicle to a fully mature follicle, which we call a Graafian follicle. And in that year of time, you can change a lot about your environment. So you
Mm-hmm.
can change your exposure to endocrine disruptors. So those are the soft plastics, the BPA, the phthalates that are in shampoo and conditioner and products that we use every day. You can change your exposure to, I know for me, one of the hardest things for me was cutting out wine.
Oh,
So we drink wine people in I mean, we live in California, right? We drink wine every day. Everybody drinks wine every day. There's wine at every event. There's wine at every dinner party. There's wine at every happy hour. And for me, that really impacted my cycles, and it really impacted my egg quality, because the more your liver has to metabolize alcohol, the less power it can put toward metabolizing the hormones in your body that it needs to. And, it's cutting that out is such a big help for people. And they don't realize that it's not just 1 month, it's not just 3 months, but it's the entire year before they're trying to conceive, that those eggs become recruited into eventually what will be the cohort that gets
beautiful.
recruited for
Yeah.
ovulation. Yeah. And so basically, because the cytoplasm of the egg grows and matures itself, and it's surrounded by this sac of follicular fluid, and the cells of the follicle are growing and changing, you have an opportunity to nurture that growth in a way that, other cells and tissues in your body don't have. And when we think of the egg, it's like this beautiful round, large cytoplasm. So
Mhm.
it has a lot of very high metabolic needs. So if people can focus on nurturing their body, eating healthy, cutting out, wine, alcohol, cigarettes, THC, and environmental toxins, they really can impact their egg quality. for a year. It's just for a year. I feel like I'm one of these people, like I understand people use substances,
Hmm.
right? People use sugar in a negative way. Like you can eat a lot of sugar to feel psychologically better. You can eat a lot of candy. You can and sugar metabolism is another thing. Simple carbohydrate metabolism is another thing that can really impact both IVF cycle quality and egg quality and reproductive health outcomes in general. So cutting out those simple carbs, it's like the
Absolutely.
easiest thing you can do.
Hmm.
Increasing complex carbohydrates,
Hmm.
increasing vegetable, just
Absolutely.
more vegetables, less meat, try to cut out alcohol altogether, and you'll be good to go.
Thank you so much. Definitely, I totally agree with the wine part because wine not only have a lot of sugar, they have a lot of hormone there too, like especially estrogen. So if you want to really drink wine, you want to do the organic wine. And then we have a lot of patients with PCOS. It
Yes.
really impact their egg quality. So the very first thing they can do, absolutely, sugar, and then the balanced diet. I love the you said like half veggie, and then we usually say the half like maybe quarter protein and then quarter good quality of like a carb like
And
tubers or
high,
sweet potatoes.
yes, high quality fats, right?
Absolutely,
So
absolutely.
really like avocados, the best thing you can eat. A lot of folic acid in
Hmm.
avocados. Folic acid, I'm sure you know, but folic acid helps you to repair and make DNA.
Mm.
So without folic acid, you cannot nurture a process where cells are dividing rapidly, because those cells need to make a lot of DNA. And the
Hmm.
DNA repair mechanisms in our body don't work well without folic acid. So we really need like, a year's worth of time, high folic acid in the diet. And some people find out that they have a genetic defect in the MTHFR gene and they metabolize folate differently. So it's also good to maybe have try to get some insight into your personal genetics,
Hmm.
like do a 23andMe screen, do a carrier screening at a physician's office, and discuss your personal genetic profile for
I love
personal
that. Absolutely. So
yeah,
even without knowing like if we have MTHFR mutation, I usually just why don't just methylated form? Let's go for
yeah,
the methylated form of like a B12 and then like a folic acid. I totally agree. So
yeah,
since we are talking about like IVF lab and you gave us good insights about even how you can improve your egg quality and so on. So is there anything like people all talks about ICSI? Is any kind of a myth about IVF or like a ICSI?
yeah. So I think, a lot of times people are very concerned about taking a sharp needle and
Mm-hmm.
shoving it into the egg, right? And it does seem a little violent, but personally, I love ICSI because that gives me the highest fertilization rates, which in the end is going to give the patients the highest number of chances to make a blastocyst. So there's something like called complete fertilization failure, and that does happen. It's totally, you cannot predict when it will happen. It looks like normal eggs, it looks like normal sperm. You put them together in the petri dish and you come back the next day and there's no fertilization. So
Mm.
with ICSI, complete fertilization failure rarely, if and ever, almost never ever happens. And when we do conventional IVF, that's when we just put the sperm and the eggs together
Mm.
in the dish. Um, we don't get to see the eggs. So that when we retrieve the eggs at the egg retrieval, they're surrounded by all of these cells. And those cells actually interact with the sperm. The sperm has to cross those cells before it
Mm.
can penetrate into the egg. So when we do ICSI, we actually take all those cells away, and we can tell you at that time of the retrieval exactly what the quality of your eggs were and how many were mature. And if you if you just do conventional IVF, you don't know that because you will not see them until the next day. So you don't know what the quality of the eggs was. Um, Another reason why I really love ICSI is because, you know, it's a very clean procedure where you are putting the sperm directly into the center of the egg. So ultimately, when you send the biopsy sample out, there's not a lot of contaminating DNA around, where when you incubate an egg with a lot of sperm, there can be contaminating DNA that affects the biopsy samples later on. So yeah, personally, I love that. One of the myths I would say is that embryologists can choose whether it's a girl sperm or a boy sperm.
Mhm.
So that is actually, I talk a little bit about that in the Thin Pink Line book, where that myth comes from. So there was a scientist back in the 50s and 60s. His name was Landrum B. Shuttles. And he did some very bad science, like didn't make any observations, you know, just that were supportive of a hypothesis, but just made some general observations that he tried to attribute sperm that were XX bearing, so female sperm, to being larger, and male sperm XY bearing to being slightly smaller. So it started this whole myth that you can actually look at sperm and see a difference between them, between male and female sperm. And that myth does persist a bit to this day,
That's not true.
nearly 50 years later.
Interesting story.
And I'm trying to think of what other myths there are. Well, I know patients sometimes have some anxiety over having ICSI, like they're afraid that there might be some birth defects afterwards.
That's I heard
And
that.
this is something that scientists look at continuously in the population. So this might be something that many people don't know, but every single IVF cycle in the US has to be reported to the CDC. All IVF births
Mhm.
and complications, the birth weight of the babies, any complications of the pregnancy or the outcome. So in a way, the government is tracking the assisted reproductive technology babies, and scientists do look at the data a lot. And one of the things that's hard is that if you're coming to an infertility clinic, you have something wrong with you, some subfertility, right?
Mhm.
You can't get pregnant naturally. There is some disease process or subfertility process going on. So I do think that these birth studies basically are kind of confounded by this is a population that has a disease process going on that we're
I
looking
see.
at, you know. So like you mentioned with PCOS, a lot of times that goes hand in hand with obesity, which is going to go hand in hand with cardiovascular problems. And cardiovascular issues and pregnancy do not go well together. You're going to have worse birth outcomes on those babies, regardless of whether they were conceived by ICSI or the natural, you know, conventional way.
I see. That totally makes sense. So what kind of a suggestion do you have a couple with this infertility challenge as my last question? Any suggestion? Like as the you say, oh, wish this done before you said 180 to 300 days before if you can prepping or anything?
Yeah, and well, and I do say that, but a word of caution on that, like not everything can be under your control.
Oh,
You can be
true.
doing all the things right, and if you have a genetic infertility issue going on, for example, diminished ovarian reserve,
Mhm.
DOR, there are a lot of very young women who were unaware that they were going to have this problem
Yeah.
of diminished ovarian reserve at a very young age.
Mhm.
And so you can, you know, I do say if there are things you can change about your environment and your lifestyle, then by all means do. But you definitely cannot cure all infertility that way. A lot of it is genetic, and it is a process that's going on. So in those cases, you know, what the services that an infertility doctor has to offer are priceless, because, you know, you can overcome a lot of genetic infertility problems using IVF now. So
So if they have some challenges in time period, 6 months or 1 year, depends on your age, just seeking the medical like a help from your doctor. And then I think that's absolutely very important for our patients with the challenges, especially.
Yes. Yep. So under 35, if you've been trying for a year and you haven't been pregnant, then we say go to a fertility doctor. And if you're nearing 40, above 35, 6 months, see a fertility doctor. But in general, if you have any complications, so that means multiple miscarriages or endometriosis or, bad periods, bad cramps, if you have a problem, then see a doctor even sooner. Don't wait at all,
Exactly.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So can you let the people know how they can follow you? Like I follow you or find you, and then they can get some service from you or find their babysitter.
Yeah. So our Instagram is Art Compass IVF. And so for people who don't know, ART is assisted reproductive technology.
Mhm.
Usually most people don't know that unless they need to know it. So Art Compass IVF. My own personal Instagram is Dr. Curly Q's. Q is spelled the French way. And I welcome people to follow me there, but honestly, my own personal Instagram, it's kind of boring. I talk about like science a lot. I talk about my own miracle baby a lot, and now the different things that she gets into, and but yeah, mostly I'm also always available via Messenger. I talk a lot to people who have embryology questions. So if anybody sends me a message, I usually do try to take the time to answer that.
Through your company, ART Compass, correct?
Yeah.
That information you are putting, I mean, your company putting right now is so valuable. I mean, so informative actually. And I appreciate it. I know you're a busy mom, and then I know your beautiful baby is waiting for you, and then you're working all day. And thank you so much for your valuable information. And then one more time, congratulations in this wonderful book. Wonderful.
Thank you
Anybody
so much.
interested in? Should they really buy this book? The Thin Pink Line. Amazing book. Thank you so much, Dang. I appreciate
Thank you
it.
for having me.
Thank you.